Communication is an important aspect of human life. The ability to produce noise, movement, or shapes to convey information brings about a certain type of emotion. That emotion is birthed from understanding one another, a powerful emotion that makes this existence worthwhile. And that's why today we're making a chat application. Boom shanker. So at this point, I'm assuming you have .NET Core installed and you have your favorite IDE ready to go. I'm going to be using VS Code for this, so people who are doing this on Mac can follow if you don't have Visual Studio. So I'm going to go ahead and start with .NET New Web. I'm going to give it a name of Chat App. So at this point, the project is created. I'm going to go ahead and cd into the project and open it with code. Let me go ahead and close my PowerShell window here. Okay, so here we have a empty project. One thing I'll say for the extensions that I'm using is this C# extension. That's about all you're gonna need. Another thing I would say, in your preferences, you want to go into settings, and let's type in file.association, right? And basically in here you want this line here, file associations, where we're going to associate CSHTML files with HTML. So we will basically get the HTML IntelliSense and code snippets inside our CSHTML files. All right. So that's that. That's basically my development setup for VS Code. Let me make this a little bit bigger. So first thing, what I want to do is I want to go into my program file, and you don't have to do this, but I'm gonna type in use URLs, and I'm gonna basically say that I want to use a different port, right? So I'm gonna use the port 3000 for this. Next thing, I'm gonna go into my startup. I'm gonna delete all these pesky comments. I'm gonna delete this environment thing, and I'm gonna delete the default middleware that we get. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add MVC with a default route. And I'm going to add MVC to my services. So add MVC. There we go. Okay. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to create a controllers folder. And there I'm going to create a homecontroller.cs. For my namespace, I want to say chatapp.controllers. I'm going to go ahead and create a public class home controller. I'm going to inherit from controller, and I'm going to control dot to import this using statement, and all I'm going to do in here is basically create my action result of index to display the page. I'm going to go ahead and basically equate it to this view. Okay, nice. Let's go ahead into our projects, what's our folder structure again, and let's create a new folder. We'll call it views. And inside the views folder, we want the standard view imports.cshtml. And one thing is, you don't have to create it like this. So basically, let me actually delete this, and I'll show you how you can use this. Use the terminal, and you can use the .NET tooling to basically do this for you. So you can type in .NET new help, and if you bear with this horrible layout due to the zooming, you can see this view imports and view start, right? So we can use this. Let me go ahead and clear this, and I'm going to say .NET new view imports. All right, and in our folder structure, we should now have the view imports CSHTML, and we can go ahead and say the same for view start. All right, and there we have it. So view imports just imports everything, and let's actually use our namespace here, chat app. And for view start, all it does is sets our layout, right? So we're gonna go ahead and move these into views. I'm also gonna add another folder called shared, and inside of here I'm going to create my layout.cs HTML file, and in here I'm going to type an exclamation mark, enter, and this should scaffold the application for me. So for the title, I'm just going to say chat app, although it's not too important. Let's go ahead and clear the console. I'm going to say .NET watch run to run my application. And while that's starting up, let's go into our views, create a new folder. We'll call it home for our home controller. And we're going to create a new file, call it index.cshtml. All right. And in here, all I want is a header tag that basically says hello world. So basically I have something to go off and make sure my application is running. One thing is, in my layout, I want to create a div, and in here I want to do render body, like so. That should be good. Let me close. Let me open this up, and let me put it to the side here, and this to the side here. Okay. So let me get rid of these semicolons here. Okay, nice. So I'm rendering my page. I have my, let me close everything actually. And now what I want to do is I want to go into my startup, and I want to add static files. So the first thing I'm going to tackle is styling my chat application. So usually if you watch my other videos, I start with building the backend, but for this tutorial, I'm going to start with actually prototyping the UI first. Okay, so let me make my code a little bit bigger and my chat application smaller. So I'm going to say app use static files. All right, and then I'm going to go into my folder structure again, and I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to call it www.root, and inside of there I want to create another folder, call it CSS, and this is where I'm going to place my CSS file. So I'm going to say site.css. All right, cool. So first thing I want to say is h1, and I'm just going to set color to green to make sure my styles are loading. Let me go ahead and open the layout. And what I need to do is I need to import it. So let's go ahead, make a link, and I'm going to say relative path css/site.css. Let me save that. Let me refresh. So let me actually go ahead and restart my application to make sure it's watching for newly created files. Let's refresh. Okay, and there we go. So site.css is properly loaded at this point. Let's go ahead and create the layout for our application. All right. So for this, I'm going to open my developer tools on my website. Let me make this a little bit bigger since we're going to be primarily looking at the code. And let's start with the body tag. All right. So at the moment, the body tag has this margin, and really, I don't know what this default margin is about, but let's go ahead and remove this margin, right? So then let's go ahead and say that height is 100 viewport height and width is 100 width, right? So it's basically gonna spread all over the place, all right? Then let's go ahead and set top to 0. So let me actually put the semicolon here. Okay, and one thing is the reason it's sort of popping down is because of this margin here, so we don't really care about that for now. What we want to do is, actually top is not that needed, pardon me. So what we want to do is give this a display of flex, and I'm going to set the initial layout to go down. So I want flex direction column, and what I want is basically have a div here, and this is going to be the nav bar. Okay, so this is going to be the navigation bar, and this is going to be the main body. All right, so let's go ahead and create these two classes. So navbar and the main. I'm going to go ahead and say background color black, and I'm going to say that the height for this is 50 pixels. Okay. here, what I want to do is I want to say that the background is red for now, to basically be able to differentiate between the two. And here we go. Next thing I want to say here is flex grow 1. So this is now going to take up the whole space. So we have our navbar on the top. Now what I want to do is have a menu on the left. So this is where the chat rooms are going to go. So you'll be able to join different chats. And on the top I want something like a private chat section where you can access that and basically switch between the two menus. But we'll get to that later. And here I want to display flex as well. But here I'm going to say that flex direction is row because it's going to go side menu and the main body. All right. So let's go ahead and create the side menu. So div.side menu. There we go. And in here, I want to say class chat app, or rather, let's keep it at chat. Okay. So let's go ahead and create these two. So side menu, I'm gonna do the same with background color black, but width, not Windows, width, I am gonna set it to 100 pixels. So let's refresh this, and here we go. I'm gonna remove the color red here, and I'm gonna go ahead into my chat, and I'm gonna set the background color to be like lightish gray, so it doesn't basically cut your eye, you know. I'm gonna set again flex grow to 1 to basically make it fill up this height. I mean this width. All right, so let's go ahead and give this a little bit of style. Let's grab this navbar here. Let's take the color picker, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go somewhere to purplish. Maybe I like purple. Or maybe no, that doesn't. There we go. So this color will do. I'm gonna go ahead and put this into my navbar. I'm then gonna go and refresh this, and I can again take this color. I'm gonna navigate to the side menu. I'm gonna again take the color picker here. I'm gonna take this color, paste it into here, and I'm gonna take a slightly lighter shade of that same color that I have up top there. And I'm gonna go ahead and put this here. I'm gonna keep the body the same. All right, so next thing is I want to elevate my components. All right, so I want to make it look like it has that 3D effect. Okay, so for this, I'm going to first put a z-index of 800 for my navbar, and the side menu can have a z-index of 50. So it's in between the navbar and the body. Okay, and next thing I want to do is give my navigation bar a box shadow of 0 on the X, 1 pixel on the Y, and I'll give it a blur of 2, solid I'll have 0. I will have 333 as my shade color. So there we go, we can see it's slightly elevated. That's alright. I'm going to copy this, I'm going to paste it into my side menu here, and I'm going to take this 1 pixel and I'm going to shift it to the right once on the X, and let's refresh it, and there we go. At this point, pretty much got the structure. So what I want to do now is I want to have some buttons on my menu. So I'm going to go ahead and put those there. So let's make a link. There's going to be no href that, so we can put a set pound sign. What I want to give this is a class of room button, right? So that's what it's going to be. It's a room button. Let's put this below the side menu, and let's go ahead and say room button. Again, for our side menu, I want to say display flex and flex direction. This is going to be column, so everything is going to be going downwards, okay? So for my room button, for now, all I'm going to say is border 1px solid black. All right. So you can see it up top there. Let's give this a sample name like room. So this is some kind of room. There we go. I'm gonna go ahead and set the color to white, like so. Text decoration, I don't want the underline. And next thing I want to say, again, I will give this a display of flex. I'm gonna align items in the center, and I'm gonna justify content in the center as well. So the text is going to be centered vertically and horizontally. So I'm gonna put this up here. Okay, so as you can see, it's kind of cutting the edges here. So what I want to do is I want to say margin and 1 rem for now. Okay, nice. So let's go ahead and take a look at the width. So the width is 68 at the moment. So what I want to do is I want to take the height and I want to set it to 68 pixels as well, since the width of this menu isn't going to change. Okay, so one thing I'd say is let's play about with the border radius. I'm going to set it to 5 pixels. Nice. And next thing, I actually want to make it look like it's basically animated on hover, so it looks like it's popping up. Okay, for this I'm actually going to take this box shadow here, I'm going to put it here, and I'm going to remove the pixel on the X. I'm going to put 1 pixel on the Y. I'm going to refresh and see what it looks like. Okay, so you can see it's slightly elevated. Let's give it a bit more blur. Let's make it a little bit darker. Okay, let's give it a little bit of solid around all the edges. Okay, cool. So there's our button. Let's go ahead and make it a bit brighter. So let's quickly copy the border color here. I'm going to put it down there so I can take it in the color picker. Let's take it here and make it just a bit brighter, like so. Cool, let's copy this color, put it here. And there we go. We have our room. Now, basically, I want to say room button on hover. Let's take this box shadow, and I want to make it brighter. Okay, so when we hover on it. So that's a little bit too bright. Let's try 333. Okay, I feel like these two should be swapped around. And let's give this 2 pixels. Okay, looks alright. Next thing is what I want is a button where I can sort of create a room. So I'm just going to put a plus here. Like so. Okay, the distance between them is a little bit too big, but first let me make a strong element here and put the button in, put the plus in there. Okay, so what I want to do now is basically put them closer a little bit. So I'm going to cut the rem in half on the y-axis. And you can see this distance here is basically half of what it is here. So I want to actually cut the margin on the bottom to 0 and actually give it a little bit more spacing on the top. So the spacing here is equal, but it's going to be a bit more. So just like that. Okay, so I got my square buttons here. Let's go ahead and make this plus a little bit bigger. So I did do /room button, I say strong, and here I will say font size of 20 pixels. Let's refresh. Okay, that's still a little bit too small. Let me grab that and see in the browser here. How big should I make it? 30, 40, 40 I feel is too big. 35, 36. I feel like 36 is the magic number here. So 36 pixels. Nice. So we basically have a sample for our room. Let's go ahead and try to make this chat. So I'm gonna close this layout. I'm gonna open up my index page. And let's remove this hello world. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add two divs here. First one is going to be chat body. So this is where the messages are going to go. And the second one is going to be chat input. So, and chat input is basically where the message is going to go, okay? Where we're going to be typing stuff in. Okay, so chat body, chat input. Let's give this a background color of red and green just so we know where they are. So red and green. Let me remove the hashtag here, like so. Okay, so at the moment they're nowhere. Let's go ahead and give this a display of flex and flex direction. We want a column again because it's going to be going chat body, and at the bottom it's going to be the input. Let's give this flex grow of 1 and flex grow of 1 here as well so we can see them. Nice, so they're basically half apart. If we give flex grow 2 here, this one's going to be a bit bigger. You get the picture, but we're basically going to do the same thing we did with this thing here, but basically the chat input I want it to be height of 60 pixels, right? So let's see how this looks. Let's remove the flex grow here. Okay, so that's a little bit too small, 80 pixels. Maybe a bit too big, 75. Okay, yeah, looks about right. So let's take this background color. I'm gonna put it here. So the background of the chat is still going to be this grayish color. And this chat input, let's go ahead and try to set it to the same color as our side menu. Let's see what that looks like. Looks okay to me actually, so I'm gonna go ahead and grab the z-index and shadow. I'm gonna put it in the chat input as well. I'm gonna give this 25 though, so it's gonna be a quarter. I'm gonna offset the y -1, so the shadow is going to be on the top this time. And that's basically gonna show it that it's above the chat window here. Okay, so actually it looks like it's getting a little bit too big, so let's go ahead and put it to 70. So now let's create a sample message, right? So in here we're gonna have a list of messages, so let's create some sort of a media object. So let's give it a class of message. Let's create a header, and then I want a paragraph. So this is going to be the message. So let's say this is a test message. Header is going to be basically the name of the person in the chat. So my name's Anton, and that's going to be the name. And let's say footer is the timestamp. So let's go ahead and say something like 16 o'clock. Okay, let's see what this looks now. Not too bad, not ideal though. Let's go ahead and type this out. So message, message header. Let's copy this one, paste it in a few times. Let's take the paragraph and the footer. Let's say message. We're basically going to say same as before. Display flex, and then we're gonna say flex direction is row because it's gonna go horizontal. Let's see what this looks like. Okay, let's remove the margin on the paragraph here. Now what I want to do is I want to basically say flex grow 1 on here. I'm gonna give this 5. I'm gonna give this one flex grow of 1 as well. Let's see what this looks like. Okay, nice. So for the header, I'm gonna say text align right. So I want it to basically go to the right here. I'm gonna say dot message everything. I'm gonna give everything a padding of 0.2 rem. Okay, and the message itself, I want it to have a margin on the top. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and say margin top, and I will say again 0.2 rem. That should be alright. So if we have a second message, and it will come from Bob, and we'll say hello world, and this was 2 minutes after. It will look something like this. Okay, so the names seem to be a little bit out of line. That is okay. Let's actually let's take a look at this. This one's around 81. Let's go ahead and for the header. So instead of flex grow, I'm gonna go ahead and say width is 120 pixels. There we go. So that might be actually a little bit too big. Let's set it to 100 pixels. Okay. And I'm gonna go ahead and actually set the colon here to make it look a little bit nicer. Okay, and let's actually say font weight bold. Okay, so the name is bolded. And for the time here, I'm gonna say, again, I'm gonna set the width to be 60 pixels for now. Let's see what this looks like. Nice, and let's say text align. I'm gonna set it to center. Okay, let's format that. Let's see what this looks like. All right, looks all right. To me, let's go ahead and quickly test this with a slightly bigger message. So maybe if we get something like this. Okay, so we're actually seeing the height break. So what I'm actually going to do, let me format this just a little bit. Okay, and instead of width, I'm gonna say minimum width. So when it has to wrap, it's not going to break the position of these things here. It's actually just going to do it like this. All right, looks good. Our side menu on the side has shrunk a little bit though. I'm gonna say that the same thing has happened there. So let's take this side menu and set the min width here as well to be 100 pixels. Okay, so now I would like to align my messages at the bottom. So let's go ahead into to chat body. I'm gonna say flex direction column, and let's not forget to display flex and justify content flex end. Okay, and it's a little bit close, so I'm gonna give it a padding of bottom of 1 rem. Okay, so we have some space. All right, now I'm gonna go ahead and imagine that I have 1,000 messages, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and create a for loop, and I equals 0, and I'm gonna let's start at 10. I think that should be all right. I'm gonna go plus plus, so I'm gonna iterate over this. Let me go ahead and put this here. Okay. So let's refresh, and boom. So you can see the problem here is obvious. First of all, the navigation bar disappeared, so let's go ahead and fix that with setting the min height to 50 pixels. There it is, so it's back. Next thing is our chat window. It's expanding a little bit too far. So let's go ahead and give that a max height of 100%. Okay, so now if I scroll down, you can see that the chat window is sort of finishing right here. So we want the chat body to end there as well. So for that, I'm gonna go ahead and say overflow auto, and voila. All right, so this is back. Let me double check that this is not suffering from the min height as well. So the chat input is, so again, min height. So Lesson to take away here is always use min height. Okay, so one thing is, before we could scroll, now we don't. And that is because we are using justify content flex end. Right, so if I refresh here, see, we are not starting at the bottom. We're going to fix that with JavaScript. But essentially, if we remove the flex end, that is no longer going to be aligning our messages to the bottom. So the way we fix that is we can go to a messages, and we will take first child, and we're just going to say, whoop, we're going to set margin top to auto. And there we go. All right, so we don't have to rely on justifying content to flex end and thus breaking that. We can go ahead and use the margin top, and that is basically a well-known Flexbox trick. All right, so there we go. And potentially, if we again have a lot of text messages, we have the scrolly wheel here available to us. Okay, so I'm happy with that. Let me remove this for loop here. Refresh. Okay, let's go ahead and style this chat input. I'm gonna have two elements here, input and a button. Okay, so in my button, I want to say send. So I'm gonna be sending my message. And let's go ahead and make our, where's my chat input? Let's go ahead, take that and move it to the bottom here. Let's give it a display of, you guessed it, flex. Flex direction is going to be row. Let's see what this looks like. Okay, so that basically stretched it. So perhaps we want a padding of 1 rem here. There we go. Looks a little bit messed up, but let's set this max height to be 70 pixels as well. And that doesn't help it. What we can do is set box sizing border box. So we are going to be basing this off the border box, and we think actually I might mess everything up if I do this, but let's go ahead and try basically set everything to box size border box. But okay, nice. So everything still looks fine. I'm gonna keep it at that. Let me go ahead and stretch this a little bit. So I'm gonna say chat input. I'm gonna say flex grow 2. I'm gonna copy this, and for my button, I'm gonna say 1. Okay, let's see what this looks like. And you know what? I'm gonna be happy with this. So let's type some kind of message in. Let's increase. All right. So for simplicity's sake, I will keep it at this. This looks like an alright design to me. Okay, so now let's focus on the internal parts of the application. Since we have our UI looking more or less what we want, we will add stuff more to it if we need to, but that looks alright to me. So let me go ahead and make this full screen, close this stuff, and let's collapse the views. We don't need to look at them. Let's add a folder. We'll call it models. And in here, what I want to do is I want to create a chat.cs, right? So again, namespace, chat app, models. And in here, I'll create a public class called chat. And this chat, we want to be able to store it in the database. So we're going to give it an ID. We want to have a collection of messages. So this is going to be a new object I'm going to create. I'm going to call this property messages. And another thing, I'll just scaffold here. I'm just going to, because I want to add users a little bit later on, but I'm going to have basically prop for users. Okay. Let's go ahead and create a public class message. And again, let me actually pop this into here so it recognizes it. And I will need to add a namespace using system collections generics. And now let me go ahead and say, right, what does the message need to contain? Well, I'm gonna go ahead and say that it needs an ID because, again, I'm going to be able to store my messages in a database. I will basically, I want to know who posted the message, so I'm just gonna say name, and then I want to know the actual message, right? So let's call this text. And next thing I want to know is the time it's been posted. Okay, so I'm just gonna go ahead and make this date time. We're gonna need it to import system for this, and I'm gonna call this timestamp. Okay, so I have a chat and I have a collection of messages. Okay, what else would I need? So I'm basically, I have rooms and I have private chats, and this chat actually should suffice for both of them. Let's go ahead and create our user. So let's go ahead and create public class user. And I'm gonna do is make it inherit from identity user. Oh, and I'm gonna use import Microsoft ASP.NET Core Identity. Okay. Okay, so we have our user. Let's make a collection of users here, like so. Nice. Now for my chat, I want to be able to say, is this a room or is this a private chat, right? So I'm going to create a public enum chat type. Okay, and in here I'm going to basically say room or private. Okay, and in here I can basically say chat type and say type. Now we can go ahead and move these into their own classes. So control dot, move to chat type.cs, and there we go. There we can see it's moved to here and it's in the same namespace. Nice. We can go ahead and do the same to messages and the user class as well. Let's make sure we save these so we don't get errors here. Okay, so we have our chat. The chat can contain users and messages. Messages can have text and the name of the user who posted it, and we can have the timestamp of when it's created, and we have the chat type. Okay, here we have our structure for our application. We're going to have a chat. It's going to be of certain type. It's going to have messages that users are going to post, and users are going to belong to some form of a chat. Okay, so now I want to go ahead and make another folder, and I'm going to call this database, right? So we're going to be popping stuff into the database. And here I'm going to make a new folder, and I'm going to call this AppDBContext.cs. So for my namespace, chat app.database, public class AppDBContext. I'm going to inherit from dbcontext. I'm going to using Microsoft Entity Framework for this. We want to make a constructor, and the name of it is AppDBContext, and the parameter for the constructor is dbcontext options, and it's a generic type, and we have to supply the AppDBContext and call it options. And what we have to do is pass it to the base, like so. Now what I want to do is I want to basically be able to register these DB sets with my AppDBContext. So let me move this up here. So let's do public DB set, say of type chats, and This is going to be a property. Let's say get set. Make sure we import chat by using chat models. Let's copy this a few times. One thing, I won't need my users, so I will need messages as well. Messages, and this one actually I won't need as well. Now what I will actually, instead of importing DB_context, I'm going to import identity DB_context. So this is going to scaffold all the identity tables for me. And what I want to do is I also want to be verbose in specifying what type of user I want for my identity DB_context, right? So if we go into here, we can see this constructor where we pass in our own type of user. If we don't, it's gonna try to figure it out by default, but I'm gonna go the extra step and try to help Entity Framework with recognizing what user I'm creating. Okay, so now that we have our models and our database context pretty much in place, let's go ahead into our startup and we're going to add the database to our services. Okay, so add DB context, and we're going to use our AppDBContext, import it, and there we go. That will do for now. Another thing we want to do is we want to add our authentication and everything. So I'm going to do add identity, and for this I will have to specify my user. For this I'm going to import my chat models, and I'm just going to specify identity role, and using Microsoft ASP.NET Core Identity. So this way I'm not going to get all the default pages, and I'm going to go ahead and build that myself because I want to keep it really simple and not add all those templates. I don't need them. So in here also for my identity, I want to specify the database that I'm going to be using. So I'm going to add entity framework stores, and I'm going to supply my AppDBContext here. And another thing, I'm going to add default token providers. This just has to do with something with how it basically signs everything. Okay. So now for my AppDBContext, I want to specify a connection string. I have Microsoft SQL Server installed. If you don't have it, I'm going to leave a link in the description. If you're using Visual Studio, you can use the local database that comes with Visual Studio. If you're not using, you're going to have to come up with your own version of a database. Use whichever one you want. I'm going to leave a link in the description for the Microsoft SQL Server, which is free. You can download it and use it. I'm pretty sure it's not too hard to set up. So I'm gonna go ahead into my app settings. I'm gonna make a property. I'm gonna call it connection strings. I'm only gonna have one, and this is going to be the default connection. And then here I want to basically say what my data source is, which is going to be, I'm not going to pretend I know the name, so I'm just going to paste in my computer's name. I'm going to make a database, and I'm going to call it chat app. Okay. Should be all right. I'm going to close that. I'm going to go ahead back into startup. I'm going to type in options, and here I'm going to specify options.use SQL server. I'm going to import Microsoft Entity Framework. And then here what I want to do is I want to pass the default connection string. So the way we do this is we create a constructor, call it startup, and the parameters I want icon configuration. I'll have to import Microsoft extension dependency injection. I'm going to call it config. I'm going to go ahead and make it global here. Thank you for doing that for me, VS Code. All right, and here I'm basically going to say config get connection string, and here I'm going to say default connection. All right, if it helps, if you don't want to leave this here, you can take this out and say something like connection string equals like this. This can look a little bit neater. I mean, my screen is a little bit too small, so I don't want things bleeding out. but if it looks smaller, you know, it shouldn't matter too much, but yeah. So at this point, I want to go ahead and try and create a database and make sure my connection string is all right and it can connect. So let's go ahead and I'm going to open up the terminal. I'm going to say .NET if not database migrations add init. So this is going to be the initial migrations for my application. Okay, so now let's try to update the database. Okay, so it didn't let me log into my database. So the reason for that is because I haven't specified it to use my Windows account. So I'm gonna have to go ahead and say integrated security equals true. Now let me pop this over to new line, like so. No, that doesn't like that. I can't do that. Okay, cool. Let me close that. Let me go ahead and try again. And after I learn how to spell integrated, definitely not like that. Integrated. Third time's the charm. Okay, so that looks all right. Let me go ahead into my Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio, and I'm gonna double check that my database has indeed been created. So let me pop into my database here. Let's open this up, and here I have my chat app. Let's take a look at the tables. I don't know if I can zoom in. I cannot. You will have to squint your eyes, but here I have my chats, my messages, and I have a bunch of stuff relating to the identity tables. Cool. So I'm confident that stuff is running. Let me close this. Let me close this. Let me close this and this as well. So now that we have our model set up, I want to go ahead and the first thing I want to take care of are these creation of these rooms. So first thing is this plus button. I wanted to trigger a model, which is going to pop up and let you basically fill out the name for the room and create it. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and make a div. I'll give it a class of model, and I'm going to give it a class of active. So if it's missing the class active, I don't want it to show. Okay, so then I will create another div, and I will call this class, and I'll give this a class of model body. Let's go into our site.css. I'll bring up my chat application here so I can see it. Make it just a bit smaller. Close this. Okay, so let's create a model, and from the get-go, I'll just say display none, and then I'll say model.active display block. Cool. Now what I want to do is have position fixed. Height I want 100 view height, and width I want 100 width, like so. And let's actually set this to minimum. I will have the z index of 200, and let's say background color RGBA and 0.222, and alpha is going to be 0.8. Next thing, what I want to do is I want to set it top to 0 and left to 0 as well. Let's refresh this, see what this looks like. And it looks like my app is not actually running, so let's do .NET watch run. So let's actually see what this looks like. All right, so you can see it's basically blurred out the background, and if I'm gonna go ahead into my model and remove the active, it's gonna be like this. So Again, let's refresh this. Let's let's start building our model body. So model body, I'm gonna go ahead and say minimum width is 300 pixels. I will say display flex. Flex direction, I'll set it to column. I want my components going down. So then let's go to the layout, and I'm gonna create a header div for my body, and I will create a footer for my footer where I'm gonna have the create button. So let me go ahead and type in create room. And here I will have my input for the text. So, and in my footer, let's make a button. I will change my model body to be a form. And then I can use ASP controller and ASP action as well. Let me change the closing tag here. Alright, now let's refresh this, see what we got. Nice. Now let's just go ahead and actually set this to display flex. I'm gonna go ahead and say justify content center and align items center. Okay. Okay, so it's all in the center. Let's go ahead and style our model body. So color, I'll say #white. There we go. Font size can be a little bit bigger. Let's say 24 pixels. Something like that. Yep. Let's give this a background color. So I will probably be okay with same color as for the navbar. So background color, like so. Okay, let's give this some. Actually, let's move the padding into the. No, let's give this a padding of 1 rem as usual. Always start with 1 rem. There we go. So it doesn't stand out quite well from the shadow, so I'm gonna go ahead and make it brighter, like so. So button, I'm gonna go ahead, say create, confirm. Okay. Now I just want some space in between all the components here, so I'm gonna go ahead and say margin top 0.5 rem. Okay, like so. Let's go ahead and make this a little bit prettier. So model body, div, and input. I will say the width is 100%, and the modal body, footer, text align is center. See this? Okay, looks way better. Let's actually increase the padding here, like so. Okay, and I think I will leave it at this. Maybe a close button will be good. So for the close button, let's go ahead and create a button. Let me go ahead and type in an X there. That's all right. Let's give this class close. And in right before the model class close, position absolute. So we position absolute if we want it to be contained within this modal. So at the moment it will be this big modal, so I would actually want it to be positioned here. So I'm going to actually put it inside the modal body. So let's go ahead and put it here. Let's refresh that, see what it looks like. Okay, let's say top 5 pixels, and we want it to be on the right, and let's say 5 pixels as well, like so. Okay, I think this margin top. Okay, and let's say margin top 0, like so. Okay, and I'll leave this button as this. You can style it if you want, but I will leave it like this. I will say type button. Okay, now that we have this in our layout, let's go ahead and introduce a new section. So render section, this is where all the scripts are gonna go. And I'm gonna call it scripts and say false here. Basically false means that this is not required for all the pages to have the scripts section. But then I want to go ahead and create another folder in my www, call it JS, and in here just call it site.js, and this is where my default JavaScript for the site is going to go. So I want to make this model basically work. So I have this button here, room button, and I'll give it an ID of create room. Okay, and in my site.js, let's go ahead and create make a variable create room button, and in the document we want to get element by ID, and we want to pass in this ID. Okay, and then we want to take this button and add an event listener. Okay, and we are going to be listening on for a click, and then we're going to proc a function, and with this function we want to take this model. So let's call this actually button dash button, create room dash button, and in here I will give this an ID of create room model. Let's do this, and then site.js, and then let's drop this down, and in here I will say create room model, and same as before, get element by ID. Let's get the element, boom. Okay, and then we take the create room model, and we want to access the class list. So class list, basically is a list of classes that has. So what we want to do is add active, and this will display the model. We also then want to be able to close the model. What we can do is we can basically say function close model, because we might be calling this from multiple places. We'll just copy this, and instead of add, we'll say remove. Okay, and then we can take close model, and on this X, on click, let's go ahead and proc close model function. Okay, let's refresh this. Let's try and close, see what we got. Close model is not defined. That's okay. Let's go ahead and drop this into a variable. Let's refresh. Okay, let's try and close this. Oh, okay. I don't even look. We forgot to add the scripts. So before we render our section, let's go ahead and create a script tag. And in here, the src, we want to basically use the same notation, local js and /site.js, like so. Let's refresh. Let's go to the console just to see what's happening. Let's close this, and there we go. We close it, and if we try to basically when we press this button, our model pops up. Okay, so now that that's working, let's go ahead and create something with what we can basically create this room. Okay, so let's take this home controller and let's create an action. We'll call public action result create room. And since we're going to be submitting a form, what I want to do is actually go back straight to the index page. So that's where I'm going to go. and return redirect to action, and I'm going to call it index. This is going to be a post, and I am going to be posting a string of name, and then in my context, which I need to my database context, I will need to make a constructor for this, home controller, and then AppDBContext is what I want to inject. Don't get, oh, okay, I already have the namespace. So let's take in this context here, use expression, okay, thank you. Okay, let's take the context, let's say chats, add, new chat. We don't need to specify the ID, we need to specify the name though. I have not created this property, so I can do control dot generate property. I'm gonna go into the chat and double check that it has created it correctly, so I don't need the internal bit here. I would like to move it up above the chat type though. So we set the name, this is going to be a room, so chat type, sorry, not chat type, but rather just type. We can set it to chat type dot room, so this is not a private chat yet. Then we can go ahead and call ctx.save changes async, and for this we will of course need to make our action asynchronous. Import the using statement, and let's type in await here. Let's go ahead and hook this up. So action is create room and controller is home. So in our layout here, where I have the model, action, let's paste the create room in here, and controller will set it to home. Now let's go ahead and try to create a room. Let me refresh this. Let me remove the active class by default. So boom, and let's say hello world. Let's create. Invalid column name, so that is okay. I have not run the migration since I added this new property, so let me go ahead and say netef migrations add chat name. Build failed, does build fail? Build does not fail. Okay, I'll just try that again. Okay, so I'm assuming it's basically using the DLL, so it cannot rewrite the DLL while it's being used, so I'll have to stop my application and run my migrations, and then database update. Okay, let's bin this. Let's go ahead and restart our server. And while that's loading up, I'm gonna start up my SQL Server Manager so you can observe the changes. Connect here. Database, chat up tables, and we will need select top 1000 row from chats. Okay, let's refresh this, submit a new chat. Hello world, create. Okay, let's refresh. And the name is null. So that is alright because we are not binding anything to our input. So let's go ahead and say name is, what are we passing? Name is name. So let's type in name here. Let's go ahead, refresh this. Let's create something again. Hello world. Great. Let's see. Okay, and there is our room. Let me go ahead and delete the stuff that is that's not needed. So delete from chats where ID is less than 3. Okay, I'll close this and let's go back to our program. Okay, so now what I want to do is move this room menu into its own view component so we can still access these rooms from a database without being dependent on a certain page. So since this side menu is global, I'm gonna depend on a view component to take care of that. Okay, so let's go ahead and close all of this stuff. I'm gonna collapse all these menus, and I'm gonna go ahead and create a new folder. I'm gonna call it view components. And inside my view components, I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call it room view component.cs. I'm actually going to copy this name first, and for the namespace, I'm going to go chat app dot room view components, and I'm going to delete the room part, and then I'm going to create a public class room view component, and let me inherit from view component, and I actually need to rename this space to view components so it doesn't clash with Microsoft's one. Let's turn this into a class, and let's create a method to invoke this view component, right? So public I view component result, invoke, and return view. And now I want to basically retrieve my database. So well, let's take room view component, AppDBContext CTX, and the Bushka, and let's generate this field. Okay, so I'm gonna grab all my chats from my context, chats dot to list, and did I not import this? No, I didn't. So there it is, and I'll also have to use the link, and let me now pass these chats to the view. Alright, so now that I have my room view component, let me close it off, and I'm going to go ahead into my views, into the shared folder. I'm going to create a components folder, and in there I'm going to create a rooms folder, and in there, yeah, let's just start with that. And in here I'm going to create a file, and I'm going to call it default.cshtml. So same way as we have a views folder home for our home controller, we have a rooms folder for our room view component. Okay, and default is just the default page that's going to be displayed. Okay, so I want to display this chats model, so I'm going to grab the namespace from here. I'm going to close this, and I'm going to say at model chatmodels.chat. And what I actually can do is take this namespace and put it into my view imports here. So I'm going to say using chat models, and another thing what I will need to do in my view imports is I'm going to have to add a tag helper from my own namespace, right? So I'm going to grab everything from chat app. And this is so I can use the view component as a tag helper. I can use it invoking, what's it called? The HTML helper methods, but I don't like them, so I want to use it as a tag helper, right? So let me close that. So I have a model chat. I'm going to actually change this to enumerable. And not a component. Okay, so now I want to create a for each loop, and I will grab a chat in model. And let me close this again. And for every chat, I want to go into my layout. I'll grab these two elements here. I'll put them in here, and I'll drop down this create room outside of the for loop. And inside the for loop, where I have my room, instead of the room, I'm going to be displaying the name of the chat. So chat.name. Okay. And now in my layout, in the side menu here, what I can actually do is I'll just grab this whole side menu, and I'll put it into my view component, and I'll wrap the for each loop in this side menu element. Okay. Now let's go ahead and type in VC for view component and room. Okay, and let me close this off like so. Okay, and hopefully with a bit of luck it works. So now the whole bar is gone, so that is okay. Let me try to restart it. Maybe there is something we missed. Doesn't seem like it. Okay, so default hasn't been found, so I might have named it wrong. Okay, so you see that I named this rooms instead of rooms, so let me change this like so. Give this a refresh, and there we go. Okay, so let me close this all off. Let me actually try to fix this first, because this name's a little bit messed up. Let's try text align center. Yeah, that seems to do the job, so I'll take this style. I will open my site.css. So the way I did this is I pressed Ctrl E, I type in site.css, and I open up my file. and then I can just type in room button. There I find it, and at the bottom I'll just say text align center. All right, so that's that. Let me refresh, and there we go. We have hello world. So now I would like to actually be able to navigate to this room. Okay, so before we do that, I want to actually create another room, and I will call this second room. I'll create this. And there we have the second room, right? So the buttons right now, they don't navigate us to anywhere because we don't have the pages for the room, okay? So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go in, let's close these two. Let's go into our home controller. And what I'm gonna do is I'm going to create a new page, or actually navigation to a page. So iAction result. I'm gonna call it chat. I'm gonna pass in an ID here. And I am going to, actually, let's make this a method body. And I'll return the view. So this is going to be an HTTP GET, and I'm going to be passing an ID in the route. Okay. So what I want to do here is actually let's grab our chat from the database. So let's say CTX chats first or default. I'll have to import link for this, and I will have to grab the ID and make it equal to the ID here. So here we have our chat, and I'm gonna go ahead and pass this chat to the view. Okay, so now let's go into our views. Let's create a new file, and we'll call it chat.cshtml. I'll create that. I will pass in a model of chat. And in here, we already basically had scaffolded what the chat should look like. Okay, so let's go ahead, take this. Let's paste this into here. I'm not going to delete this sample here yet. And what I want to do is I want to replace these messages. All right. So I will go ahead and create a for each loop and var message in chat messages. Let me close this window so it's easier to see. And I will just need this first one. I'll delete these two messages. And what I want to grab is the message dot name. I think that's what it was called. So let me go and check in messages. So yeah, I have name, text, and time span. So here I have my name at message.text and at message.timespan. All right. So this time span is obviously date time, so it's going to be displayed a little bit messy at the start, but I'm okay with that. Next thing is these messages. So at the moment we are not including these messages, so the model binding doesn't work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to say include dot messages. All right, and let me import NT framework core for this, and I will actually indent this a little bit so it's easier to see. Okay, let's give this a refresh. Okay, it's recompiling. Another refresh. Maybe something has happened. Let me check. Okay, so time span doesn't exist. It's timestamp. Okay, so let's go ahead and do this. Let's give this another refresh. Is it waiting for a change? Is it ec? Let me restart it. Okay, and another thing I think I forgot to do when creating my models is set initializers for my lists. So let's go ahead and create a constructor here. Constructor, and say chat, empty constructor, and in here all I want to do is take these messages and set them to a new list of message. Okay, and I'm just going to go ahead and do the same for my user property, like so. Okay, actually that was not the problem. All right, so it's not actually chat, but rather model. There is nothing that's named chat. All right, so will it blend? Come on. Okay. Okay, nice. So let me give this a refresh. Nice. Let's try to navigate to, actually before navigating, we'll probably need to put some links in there. So let's go into our default component here. And I'm going to delete this href. I'm going to say ASP controller home, ASP action is chat, and ASP route dash ID will be chat.id. Okay. Let me see if it will be okay with new line. No, it's not. It's very fussy. So let's refresh this. Let's double check that the route is created correctly. So /3. So that should be all right. Okay, so because we don't have our messages, we can see that this side menu is out of whack a little bit. And so let's go ahead and fix that. So again, I'm going to press Ctrl E and take my site.css. I'm going to take my side menu in here where I have min width 100 pixels. I'm also going to set max width to 100 pixels to keep it in place, like so. Okay, so at this point, we're navigating to these two rooms, and you can see the ID here is changing, and all is okay. So let's close this, and let's fill out this form so we can actually submit something to create a message. So let's create a form so we can submit the message. ASP controller, again, will be home. ASP action create message. What we want to do is we want to wrap our input in here. Now the main thing we'll need to do is to pass in the chat ID with the message that we have here. So let's create another input field. We will say type hidden, right? So we can't see it. And the value for this one we'll just say @model.id, okay? And the name for this will be chat ID, okay? Here we'll just say name equals message, okay? So we have the message and we have the chat ID. This input is hidden, and send, let's type, let's say submit. So we're being verbose again. Again, refresh. This has gotten a little bit messed up because of this hidden input field. So let's see if I can actually just place it at the end and if that will fix it. No, it hasn't. Let's see what's happening in the back here. So chat input. There's our form. All right, so the form is basically what's breaking it. So I'm going to go ahead and grab this class. I'm going to give it to the form and I'm going to remove the div. Okay, so let me move this input back up top here. Refresh, and there we go. Okay, so let's go to our home controller and let's create this action. So I'm just going to copy this chat thing here. I'm going to rename this to create message. I will remove everything from the route here. I'm going to say post, HTTP post. And I will have chat ID. And I'll also be passing a string called message. Okay. Now this will, because we're going to be saving stuff, I want to make this asynchronous. So now it's a task, and let's go ahead and create a new message. So message equals new message, and inside of here, let's go ahead and set the chat ID, which we really should have. So at the moment we don't. So basically, this message does not navigate to the chat that it belongs to. Okay. So one quick thing, if I grab my SQL manager, and I will go into messages and I'll select top 1000 rows. You can see that the chat ID property is there, but it's not on our model. So this is something that Entity Framework adds on its own. So if we go ahead and create a new property and chat ID, we don't have to recreate our migrations, and we can also, and in this property, we're going to create an accessor to the chat that it's pointed to. So if something, we can access the chat from the message, okay? And we'll just call this chat. So chat. Okay, so that should be fine. Now what we can do here is we can say take the chat ID and set it like so, and then we can take the text and set the message to the text. We will say name, and I'll just say default for now. Okay, obviously it doesn't like this message here because we have named our parameter message as well. So let me drop this to a new line. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give this capital M. And for our timestamp, let's just do datetime.now. Okay, and that should take care of that. So there's our message. Let's go ahead and say context messages.add message, and then we can call away ctx.save changes asynchronous, and there we go. And then all we have to do is basically return to the same chat. So an easier way to actually do this would be to grab the same chat and add the message to there, but I will leave that for the end of the video, and I will just redirect to action. I'll just say chat, and I'll pass in a new parameter. I'll say ID equals chat ID. Okay. So this should be good. Let's check that I have no errors. I do not. Let's refresh. Okay. So I'm in my hello world chat. Now let's say hello world message. Let's send this. Okay, and there is our message. Now you can see that we are getting the date as well. So, I mean, I think that's all right. Let's leave it like that. If we go to the second room, the messages aren't here, and the messages are here. Okay, so let's just say another one, send. We go here, hi, send. So basically at this point, our chat is working. Now all we have to do is proceed to allowing users to basically create an account. So we'll do authentication. And for the last part, once all the setup is done, that's where we're going to add SignalR and private chats. So let's crack on and add the authentication. I'm gonna put full screen for my editor here, and I'm gonna close all these windows. Now, first thing I want to do is let's collapse all of this, so I don't want to be looking at this. I'll go into my startup, and right here, after I use my static files, I'm going to do use authentication. So that basically adds authentication to my application. And for my add identity, I'm going to go ahead and specify some options here. And what I want to do in my options, I want to basically set some rules for my password so I can make the sign-in process a little bit easier. And basically, required digit, I want to say false, and I want to do this for a couple of options. So I want to do require lowercase false, require non-alphanumeric false, require uppercase false, and require length. I'm just gonna say 6. So my preferred passwords in development environment are password. I just don't have to remember an extra thing. Okay, so that takes care of that. Let's go ahead and create another controller. I'm gonna call this account controller. Okay, namespace chat app controllers, public class account controller, inherit from controller. Let's import it. Okay, now I want a couple of actions. I want iActionResult login, and I want to just display the view here. And all I want to do is give this an attribute of post, and in here I'm going to supply my username and password. Okay, and this will have a method body. So let me go ahead and return this here, and here I'll just put a comment to do login. Okay. And for clarity, I'll put HTTP get here as well. I will copy this, and I'll do the same for register. And I will do public iActionResult logout. So to do logout, return view. Okay, and to do register. Okay, so here we're just essentially what's it called, displaying pages, and here's where the main functionality will go. So the main thing I want to be using for authentication is the manager classes that .NET Core Authentication provides. So let's create a constructor, a controller, and sign in manager. And let me import Microsoft ASP.NET Core Identity. And in here, I want to pass in my user from our models. And I will just say sign in manager. And let me remove the underscore here. I'll create a new variable right here, and I'll generate a global field. Okay, so for my login, and what I want to do, I want to take my sign-in manager and I want to do password sign-in async. All right. So if we go into this method, we'll take a look at basically we will need a type of user and we'll need a password. So before we try to sign in, we need to pass in a user object. So to grab our user, we will have to basically grab our user manager. Okay, and in here I'll say user and say user manager. Small u though, put a comma here, and let's create again a proper global field. Okay, so here now we want to create a variable user and we want to use the user manager and we want to find by, and we have a couple options here. So the ID, we won't have access to the ID. We might have access to email. We have a one that finds a user by login and by username. So I want the one by name. So I'm going to go ahead and type in user here, username. All right, so this is now a task that returns a user. So what I want to do is I want to say async task. I want to make this method asynchronous, okay? And I will need to import system.threading, say call await. And now this user is a model of user. So this is what we're going to pass here. And we're going to pass in our password as well. And then we're just going to pass in true false for the other two parameters, okay? So then we want to store the result and await for it. So what this result is basically the sign-in result. So in here, we can basically check if result is succeeded. This means that we have authenticated correctly. So in here, we would return the view. So this would return the login, or what we could do is we could redirect to action and say index. I'm not going to bother with validation. Basically, I'll release a second episode where we clean the project up a little bit, and that's where I'm going to do it. This is sort of bare bones example. So if we have succeeded, what I want to do then is I want to just go ahead and return redirect to action, and I will say index, and I will go to the home controller. All right, and this one I will actually set it back to login, and the controller that I'll specify is account. Okay, so simple enough. We get the user and then we try to sign in. So another guard that we might want to implement is say user doesn't equal null and do this guard here. So I don't think it's really that necessary, but for this example, but nevertheless, let's do it. I want to call user manager and I want to say create async. Okay, and what we need to pass to here is a model of user. So we will have to create a new user. So let's go ahead and do that. So user, for our username, I will specify the username. And now the password, we'll treat it a little bit differently. We're going to go ahead and invoke a different type of method. So if we just hover over this, it will just want a user, but the second one will also want a password. Okay, so let's go ahead and pass a user and let's pass a password as well. Right, so this is going to create a user with a password. Let's create user result. Oh, let's just call this result for now, and this will be again asynchronous. Let me grab this here and I'll paste it into here. So similar to the previous result, what we want to do is we want to say if result succeeded, go ahead and proceed. Otherwise, what we want to do is we want to redirect to the register page. Okay, so if we have succeeded, let's just go ahead and use the sign-in manager to sign in async, and we're just going to pass in a user. And again, we're just going to say false and false. Oh, just false ones. And let's say, oh, wait. Okay, so at this point we'll be signed in, a cookie will be created, and all we'll want to do is basically just return to the index page. Now for our logout, what we want to do is once we log out, we want to go back to the login page, and again, this will have to be asynchronous. So let me copy this, let me paste it here, and you guessed it, we're gonna use the sign-in manager, and we're going to sign out async, just like so. And we'll need to call await on this. So this is essentially it for the background functionality of this. Now we can go ahead and create the pages for this. Let's go into views, and we'll create a new folder, and we'll call it account. And in here I want to create login.cshtml. I'm going to go ahead, create a div. I'll put a form in here. Inside this form, I'm going to specify the controller account, and I'm going to specify ASP action login. And here I'll create two inputs, and I'll say that they're both text. One I'll give name of username, and the other one name I will give it password. Type, I mean, I can set it to password, but ultimately it doesn't really matter that much. Placeholder, I will just say username, and placeholder, I will say password, and then I'll provide a button. I'll say submit, and type is submit. So this is it for my login form. I'm going to copy it, and because I'm not requiring a confirmation password for my register page, I'm basically going to do the same again. All my passwords are pretty much just going to be password. So I'm just going to change the action to be register, and the username and password is going to be the same. I'm just going to change this to register. I'm not going to think too much about styling these. What I will do is in my home controller, I'm going to go ahead and protect this with an authorized tag. Okay, so you need to be signed in if you want to access this controller. All right, so let's check the console. Everything seems to be all right. Let's go ahead and bring in my application back. Like so. All right, so in here, let's go ahead and give this a refresh. And here you will see that we are redirected to the login page, but we can still see this menu. It's not ideal. I will leave this for the cleanup part, but ultimately I just want to be able to register. Okay, so let me quickly go into the login page, and I'll add a link in a div here at the bottom. And what I want to do is I want to say ASP controller account and ASP action register, and I want to say register, right? So let me refresh this. Let me go to the register page, and I want to register as Anton, and I will say password. Okay, so let me register. There we go. I will save this, and now if I go to these pages, I can do so, right? So now I'm authenticated, and if I'm gonna go to my application and look at cookies for this site, I have a couple. Some of these are from my other videos, since the what's it called? The address seems to be same-ish. So, but the main ones that let's actually clear this, and I will log in again. So I'll clear everything. I'll refresh, and I'm back at the login page. I can submit it, and there we go. So I have two cookies. One is identity application. So this is my authentication essentially, and then the anti-forgery cookies for this form, so nobody else can forge a message for me. Okay, so that's essentially it for that. Let me close this console, put it back there. Okay, so now that I am signed in, what I can do is I can go into my home controller, and instead of providing the default here, what I can do is I can say user.identity.name. Okay, let's give this a refresh. And again, I'm going to go to Hello World, and I'm going to type in a message. Hi from Anton. I'm going to say send, and you can see that Anton says hi from Anton, right? So now if we have users, let's go ahead and grab another window here. Again, I will register, and I will say Bob, password, register. I'll go to the Hello World room. I'll say hi from Bob. I'll say send. Okay, so the only thing that we're missing now is really the SignalR part to be sending messages back and forth in real time from our users. All right, so let me close this window. So the next step I'd like to take is to clean up these rooms. If you noticed in the incognito tab that I've loaded up as soon as I logged in, I still had access to these two rooms. So imagine if we had 100 rooms, some new user is coming in and he has access to all these rooms, right? So I would like my users to be able to essentially pick the rooms they want to see on their list on the left, okay? And the rooms that they create, they will be joined to automatically. So for this, I will close all of these pages. I'm going to go into my chat. And right here, let me actually make this full screen for now. Right here where I have my users, this is not really a correct relationship because a user can be in many rooms and a room can have a user that is also in another room. So essentially, it's not a one-to-many relationship, it's a many-to-many relationship, okay? So what we'll need to do is to create another model. I'm going to call this chat user, okay? And in here, namespace, I will say chat app, models. I'll create a public class, call it chat user. And in here, I will create 4 properties. First one will be a string, and this will be a user ID. And then I'll create a second property. This one will be just user of type user. I'll then copy this, and I'll do 2 more properties, but this one is going to be for room ID, or rather, let's rename it to chat ID since our object is called chat. And the type is going to be int. So remember the chat ID here is integer, so this is an int. And then we can set the type to chat and say chat here. Okay, so this is a link. And now we can also specify something called a user role. All right. So this property, I will actually, let's go ahead and generate a class. Actually, it's going to be an enum. All right. So similar to a type of a chat, I want to have a type of a user. So if you have you ever used Discord or stuff like that, you can have basically roles, different roles in chat rooms. So you can have an admin, you can have a guest, etc. Right. So let's go ahead and just make up something. So we will say admin, member, and guest. Okay. So that's that. Basically, I'm not really gonna take great use of these roles. All I want to basically say is right? Somebody who has created a room is an admin, and he can essentially delete this room. If you remember, let's say you can kick guests, and guests really are lowest level peasants. They join, and all they can do is talk and observe. All right, so they don't have any privileges. But we obviously treat our guests very nicely, so let's not call them peasants. I will close that. I'll close this. Let's go ahead into our not migrations, but rather database. So AppDBContext, and I'll create a chat user, and I will call this chat users. Okay. Let's go ahead, fire up a new terminal. And I'll say .NET EF migrations add chat users. Okay, let's add it. I will probably need to stop my application from running because it's going to be using the DLL, so the build will fail. Yep, so let me do this. Go back here, do this again. Okay, so it requires a primary key to be set. That is alright. So our chat user, since it's a many-to-many relationship, we don't have a primary key. What we do have is a composite key. And the thing with the many-to-many relationship, a user cannot be in the same room twice, right? So there can't be two links that are identical. So basically, we are gonna make a composite key out of user ID and chat ID. So what we have to do inside our AppDBContext class. So all we'll have to do is basically override a method that will essentially help us configure the relationship for chat users, right? So let's go ahead and say protected override on model creating. So there it is. It is of type void, right? So there it is, and like so. All right, so what this lets us do is call the builder. Let's grab the entity that we want. So our entity is chat user in this example. And now what I'm going to do is I'm basically just going to say has key. All right. And X is going to be standing for my entity. And I'm going to specify that the key is going to be chat ID. And what I'll have to do is actually put this into an object. So to make it a composite key, right? So let me put it like so. And X user ID. There we go. Let me close this off. Okay, so now this is essentially marking this chat user to have a composite key that consists of chat ID and user ID. Okay, and another thing we'll have to do in here is say base dot on model creating. So base represents the base class. So you can see if I click on base, it highlights data and DB context. So we're accessing a method inside our parent. And what we're going to do is we're going to pass the builder here. So before builder. So before we execute this, we're basically executing all the model on model creating methods inside here. So stuff like our identity tables are going to be created, and all the configuration is still going to be executed. Okay. So this line is quite important. Don't miss it out. Otherwise, everything will be messed up. Okay, so let's go back to the console and try to run our migrations. Okay, so there's the scaffolding done, and let's do a database update. So now let's go ahead and bin this console, and I'm going to start up my application again. Okay, so now that the application is running, let's go ahead, close AppDBContext. Let's go into our home controller, and let's go ahead and fiddle with this create room, right? So when we create a room, we want to assign a user to it, right? Our chat at the moment has a collection for users, and we have actually forgotten, well, not we, I have actually forgotten to set the chat users here. So let me grab this class chat user and let me set it here. So in my chat, I'll have users, and I'll change the type here as well. And in my user, I will have to create a public collection of chat user and call this chats. Okay. So I will have to import custom collection generics. Okay. All right. So I think this should still be okay. I don't think we need to rerun the migrations. Okay, so now that we have our chat, we instantly want to add a user to it, okay? So let's go ahead and grab this chat, put it in a new variable, like so. I will add the chat here still, but now what I want to do is I want to say chat.users.add new chat user. Role will be, let me check what the role was, user role. I think a better name for it would be actually chat role, but I will leave that for later. So chat role is admin. And user ID, this will be the only property that we need to set for this, and Framework will take care of setting chat ID for this automatically. And here, let's say user. So we're getting our user context. We'll go and say find first. So this is a method that retrieves the first claim that is matched by the specified predicate. Right, so find first. And then here what we're going to do is we're going to specify claim type. So for this we'll need missed off an S, so claim types. And for this we'll need to import using statement.claims, right? Like so. And now what we want to say is basically say name identifier and grab the value. And that's it. So this is going to retrieve our user ID and bind it to here. We're going to add the chat, and Entity Framework will take care of the rest. Now let's add an option to join a chat. I want to specifically say join this chat, and then we don't have to perform any checks, right? So let's create a public action result. Let's say join chat ent ID for the chat that we want to join. And then let's go ahead and say HTTP post here as well. One thing is thinking about it, I want to grab it and put it somewhere down here. So I have create room, and here I will say join chat, right? For semantics, let's go ahead and say join room. So then all I want to do is basically do something a little bit similar to this. I'm just going to grab this chat user. I'm going to create a object. So I'm going to say chat user equals new chat user. And in addition to here, I'm going to say member. And chat ID, I'm going to set to ID. So now let's go ahead and grab this type over here. Since we are going to be saving this, let's grab these two, pop them here. Let's take chat user. We'll have to say chat users, pop it in here. And since the link will be automatically, well, not automatically, we're telling to create it, then Entity Framework will be able to figure out on its own how to link it. All right. So then we are going to redirect back to index page. Just like so, that should be all right. Now another thing to do is we need to take care of this view component. So this view component at the moment, it just basically gets all the chats. So what we want to do is we want to get the chats based on user ID. So let's go ahead and actually go into chat users. And what we'll do is we will say where X will stand for a chat user, and we'll say user ID equals, and again we will reuse this method here, or rather function. So it looks like we don't have the access to user, so let me just quickly check find first. All right, cool. So actually just forgot to import. That's all right. Let's say HTTP context here, big C though. And let me actually drop this to its own line. So user ID, like so. All right, so now we're getting all the chat users where the ID is this. Next thing, these are essentially all the links, all right? So next thing I want to do is I want to say include X, and what I will say is chat. And don't forget to import Entity Framework Core. And we're including all the chats, so now what I can do is I can select X and I can say chat, like so. One thing that can happen here is that this component is not authorized. So let's go ahead and say something like http context.user.identity.is authenticated, right? So if it is authenticated, I'm actually thinking about this. I want to put this in my controller, or rather, sorry, my layout. Again, we will. This is not the best. What's it called? Way to do this, but we will clean this up. Don't worry. So I'll create a if user identity is authenticated. Let's render this. So let's go into the console. Let's see if everything's alright. Everything seems fine. Let me go to the home controller. I'll quickly check if I don't forget anything. Create room, join room. So we join the room. Yes, that's fine. Create room, create message. That is okay. Chat. Yep. Everything seems alright. Let's pop this over here and this over here. Okay. I'll close this. Let's give this a refresh. Okay, so now that we're not authenticated, this sidebar is gone, so our view component is not being rendered. Let's go ahead and log in. Now let's try go ahead and create an actual room for Anton. All right, so let's say Anton's room, create. All right, and there it is. Now I can actually use this index page to display the rooms that you can join. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that in our index page here. Let's go ahead, take CTX chats, and all we'll do is just call to list and pass in all our chats to the view here. Let's go to our index page in the home controller, and I'll just remove this stuff. I will delete the chat input as well, like so. Let's give this a refresh, see what this looks like. Okay, nice. Now let's say add model enumerable chat. Okay, so that should do. And now actually let's grab the element from our side menu. So components, default, and let's grab this room button. Let's go into here and let's just basically do a for each loop. So var chat and model. So let's see if that yields the good results, and it does. So this link is actually a link to the chat and not join chat. So that's what I actually wanted to do, is I wanted to link to join chat. Let me close all of this stuff and let me grab the join room here. Since this is a post, I don't actually want to convert this to a post. So let me go ahead and turn this into a get. I will do join room here. And then route ID looks all right to me. That should pass it here. And then instead of redirecting to index, what I will do is I will redirect to chat. So let's say chat, controller is home, and the parameters, I will say ID equals ID. Okay, so this should then redirect me to the chat room, and the ID will be passed, and all should be good. So let's go ahead and try that. Let me refresh. Let me try and join the second room. So there we go. You can see I got redirected to the second room and it got added to my list. I can go to Anton's room. There is no home button, but let's say I delete the route. And here are the rooms again. Okay, so if I go to second room again, you can see that it's trying to insert it again. Let's actually say in here some condition that will basically allow us to filter out these rooms that we have already joined them, so we don't attempt to join them again. So let's go ahead and actually turn this into a method body. We'll return this. I will grab this function here, and I will assign it to a variable chats, like so. And then I will say, let's indent this. I'll say where, and I will say users any, and in here I can then again go ahead and specify y.userid, and let's say equals user ID. So at this point we're having to copy this user ID a couple of times. I will keep copying it. I will leave it to till the cleanup section to actually show you how to properly clean this up. All right, so at the moment we're getting all the chats where the chat users contains the current user. So what we actually want to do is put a not here. And we also want to include the users, right? So actually say x.users, so we can go ahead and map to them and actually perform this check. All right, so now let's go ahead and give this a refresh, and hopefully, let me actually not forget to pass the chats to my view. Let me refresh. And again. Okay, so now you can see that we're only getting hello world, and this is just another room that we are able to join. So now let's go ahead and finally hook up SignalR to our application and make sure that the user can connect to it through the chat room. Okay, so let me close these two. Let me go to my startup. And what I will do is first to my app, I will not add, but I will use SignalR. And in my options, I'll have to pass in routes. I will leave them empty for now, but this is where we're going to be adding a chat hub, okay? And in my services, I want to add SignalR, okay? And this will be it. So this is the setup for SignalR. Now the main thing that we will need to do is we'll need to take care of a few things. The first thing that we will need to do is creating a hub so we can actually send messages back and forth. Now a hub is something similar to a MVC controller, or you can think of a hub as SignalR controller, okay? So let's go ahead into our folder and let's just do the same thing we did for the controllers. Let's create a folder, we'll call it hubs. And in there, let's create a chat hub.cs. Let's give this a namespace of chat app hubs. Let's create a class, public class chat hub, and we inherit, you guessed it, from hub. Not hubs, but rather hub. And we will be importing the SignalR package. Okay, so now we have this context, and this is essentially a controller, so it can have its own routing, or it can be used as a service in our controller, right? So we can bring this chat hub into the controller, and we can ping messages to it, and that way we can access WebSockets or any other, basically the functionality that SignalR provides. We can either direct the routing straight to the chat hub, or we can inject it as a service into our controller, and then we will be able to bring up the chat hub instance in our controller and redirect the communication through our controller as a proxy. Okay, so we will leave this empty for now because I actually want to use this as a service in my controller. So let's go to controller, home controller, and it is getting a little bit bloated. So what I will actually do is create a chat controller for which will essentially take care of this message delegation. Okay, controller.cs. Okay, I'll again namespace chat app controllers public class chat, not chat app, but rather chat controller, inherit from controller. This is a new class, import MVC. Okay, now let's go ahead and make a constructor. I'm going to type CTOR and press tab. That will generate this code snippet for me. And in here, what I want to do is I want to inject my SignalR hub, right? So basically, it will work as a service, and I will be able to direct all the requests that are coming into the controller into my hub. And I'll just show you a couple of reasons why you might want to do that. So let's say I big H hub context using SignalR, and what we're going to import is the chat hub. Okay, like so. And I'm just going to call it chat. I'm going to make a global variable, and I'm going to generate a field. Okay, so the general workflow for SignalR is that it's a JavaScript client. So even though we have this one .NET Core application, it's going to have a client in the browser, and this is the backend, right? So In this one application, there's an obvious separation, and the client that's going to be in the browser is going to be using the SignalR JavaScript package. So the workflow is the page gets displayed, the client gets loaded, and once the client is loaded, then it connects. All right. So when we serve the page, the connection is not instantaneously established. It will rather be established when the page is displayed and the client has established connection. So this controller will act as that bridge to the client. Okay. So let's create a public action result for now, and I'll say join chat. Okay. And in here, I want to pass the chat ID. Okay. So we are going to be joining a chat, and I'm going to be returning OK. So this is going to be more of an API than a page response type of controller. And what I want to do, call chat, and I want to take groups, right? So there are clients and there are groups. Clients are the individuals. Group is a collection of individuals, right? So our chat is going to be a collection of individuals since we want to ping the message to everybody. That's what it's going to be, all right? So we're going to take groups. We're going to call add to group async, okay? So now I'll have to say await, and I'll have to convert this to asynchronous. Running. Let me move my mouse a little bit. Okay, so what do we need to join the group? Let's have a look. We need a connection ID, and we need a group name. And there's also a cancellation token, but we don't worry about that. That's optional. So for our connection ID, we will need to pass that as well. So let's go ahead and say string connection ID. So I'm going to pass connection ID, and group name is actually a string as well. So let's go ahead and I will restore the order in the universe by making these parameters in the method align with the parameters in this method. Okay, so I want a string, and I will say room name. Okay, and now I'm passing it here. Okay, so we've essentially joined this group. Very nice. Let's go ahead and do the same, but this time we want to leave a group. All right, so leave chat, and let's actually make this a little bit more readable, because I know we have chats and rooms all over the place. This is a room. I know chat is kind of our abstract object, but this functionality is relating to the room, and so I'm gonna keep calling it room. And all I'm gonna do here is I'm basically gonna say remove from group async, and everything here is going to be the same. I want to authorize this controller, so only users that have logged in can access this controller, and these are going to be post methods. And let me say I'll set the route here, controller, and here I'll say action slash connection ID slash room name. I'm going to copy this, I'm going to paste it here, and there we go. So the route's going to be chat, join room, connection ID, room name, or chat, leave room, connection ID, room name. Now the next thing I want is a message, okay? So I'm going to create a public async task action result. I mean, you could pretty much copy the other ones, but let's go ahead, send message. All right, string message. I'm gonna return OK. Now what I want to do is, again, I want to call await on my chat, and I want to go to clients. I will take group, and what I want to do is I want to pass in my group name to this controller as well. So string, instead of group, I'll call it room name, like so. And here I will call send async. So I'm sending a message to this group. Okay, so what we're gonna send here is a message. Now I'm gonna actually go to my home controller since we do have this functionality to create a message here. So I will take and copy this for now. I will close this, and in here, let me pop this here. Let me take this date time. I'll say using system. For the context, I will need to bring in my application DB context, and actually thinking about it, I can just do it here. So let me drop down my parameters, and I will say from services, since this is the only method that's going to be using my AppDBContext using chat database CTX, and let me replace these two. So one thing is this chat ID. Really thinking about it now, I think it would have been much better to give this chat ID a string. We will do that in the refactoring stage. I'm going to show you how to take care of that issue. But let's go ahead for now. We'll put a band-aid on it and we'll say chat ID. And this will be an integer. And I will actually move it up. That looks all right to me. So we save it. And then we want to send. So what do we want to send? We want to send it to some kind of a method. Let me drop this down to a new line. And this method, we will say, is just receive message. So this is pretty much what it says in the documentation. I'm not going to go too far from it. It's pretty descriptive. So this method is going to exist on the client. So when we execute this line of code, what will happen is we will send a message to the client and it will execute this method that we have defined. Okay, and of course we'll get to how to do that soonish. Now, what do we actually want to send? So I'm just gonna go ahead and send my message here like this. Okay. Now I'm gonna go ahead and install the SignalR client. Let me create a new terminal. I'll just type in npm install at ASP.NET SignalR. Now that that's done, let me go ahead into. I'm gonna go into ASP.NET dist browser, and I'm gonna grab these two files. I'm gonna drag them over into www root folder. I'm gonna move them. All right. So that will do for now. Let me close node modules. Let me delete it because I don't want it. And package lock.json, I will delete this as well. All right. So let me take these two. I'll pop them in here into my JS folder. Come on, get in there. All right. And really, I don't think I needed the SignalR JS. I'll just keep it there for novelty. Okay, so now that that's there, let me close this window. Let me close this SignalR thing. I'll keep this open. Now, since we are using SignalR only in our chat rooms, it makes sense to include them there and not include them in our layout. So let's go ahead into home. I'll collapse account. I'll go into chat. And in here, I will create a section. I'll call it scripts. Okay, and this is where I want to create a script tag. And I will set the source to BJS. And I will need to copy the name, SignalR min.js, all of this. Such a small, this is like the smallest window in the world, man. Okay. There we go. Let's quickly make sure that it's loading properly. Let me join a room. Okay, there we go. Let me check the network. And there we go. There we have our SignalR and the preview. I don't need to look at it, but I can see it's using Webpack and all the JavaScript goodies. So let's collapse it here. So here's our SignalR. Let's create another script tag, and this is where our JavaScript relating to using SignalR will go. So first thing, what do we want to do? We want to take care of creating a connection to the hub. So if you remember when I was explaining or going over it briefly, when the page gets displayed, we then connect to the hub, right? So the connection is not established when the page is displayed. The connection is established after the page is displayed, JavaScript is compiled and run, all right? So let's go ahead and create a connection. And here I'm just gonna say new SignalR hub connection builder. All right, so if you know anything about design patterns, this is essentially a builder design pattern that the implementers of SignalR decided to use, and that's what that is. I'm going to put a dot here, and I'm gonna say with the URL. So we're essentially creating a builder, and then we're passing in some methods that basically say, right, this is what we want to build it with, okay? And we want to build it with this URL and any other options that we provide, okay? But this is the only option that we will need to provide, right? So I'm just gonna create a /chat URL. Since I have a chat controller, so that's going to be residing at /chat. I want my hub to be residing at chat URL, right? Or I can actually say chat hub, okay? And then I'll call it build, right? So once I have specified all the methods that I want, all the options that I want to build my connection with, I'm going to build the connection, right? Okay. So next thing I'm going to do is specify this method that we have created. So receive message, right? So we're sending a message. Well, where's this method, right? So let's go ahead and create it. So this method is pretty much an event type of thing, right? So you know how we have a input when we add event listener? This is something similar. So we're going to take a connection. We're going to say on. So if you use jQuery, you will be familiar with on. And then we're going to say, I'm just going to go here, copy this method name, receive message. I'm going to paste it here, okay? And the next thing I want to say is the data, right? So if you used Axios, this is already like familiar functionality to use. I'm going to say function because I care about browser backwards compatibility without including too much JavaScript. Because if they're using old browsers, they're going to use the old internet and it's going to be slow. So you can't bloat your JavaScript. I'm joking. I just feel like it. I'm a hipster, okay? So I'm going to pass data here. And for now, all I'm going to do is I'm just going to console log this data, right? And then what we want to do is basically start the connection. Like so. Easy enough, right? So this is actually going to be a promise that it returns. And in here we can specify a function that will basically say, right, so the connection is ready. What do we do? I'm not actually going to do anything here yet. What I will do here is I will also do a catch. Okay, and function. And here I'll say error, and I'll basically console log error. We have the connection, we have the method that we're going to be sending our receiving our messages on the client, and we have started the connection. The first thing that we need to do when we have established a connection, we need to join a group. All right. So we actually need to say, right, we are connected. Let's join this room. I will create a couple of functions. Var join room. I'm going to call this function. I'll say Axios post, and let's post it. So it's going to be /chat /join room /connection ID room name. So the room name, I can go into my model, and if I check that I'm correct, chat name, yep, I have the name property. Let me close this. I can pretty much just go ahead and say at model dot name here, okay? And if you're viewing this in Visual Studio, you will see that it's working. Essentially, this will get highlighted. If you don't, to cancel out in the Razor, you will have to put 2 @ signs, but 1 @ sign will be fine. Okay, now the mysterious connection ID. Probably didn't know it was mysterious until now. Where is it coming from? Well, the connection ID is created right here when you start the connection, right? So you build it and then you establish the connection. So this is sort of like a unique ID that's generated on the client. And this ID is actually not accessible in the controller. This is something accessible only in the hub context, right? So the general idea is we connect. So once we're ready, for some reason, I don't know why they made it like this. I looked all over the place. You cannot retrieve the connection ID from this connection, which is silly Billy, right? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna return the connection ID from the chat hub, right? I know, sucks, but this is what we'll have to do. So let's go ahead and create a public string. So this ID is going to be a string. We'll just say get connection ID, and all we need to do is make this a lambda. Call the context. So this is something similar to the HTTP context of the controller, and I'm just gonna say connection ID. So, right, this is all I'm gonna use this chat hub context for, and I'm gonna close it at this point. So now what I can do in my connection, I can actually go ahead and invoke that connection get connection ID method. So shame on me for closing it. Let me go into hubs, and I will get connection ID. I'll get this name, and what I will say is I'll call upon my connection, and I'll say invoke. So invoke is gonna trigger a method on our server. So the method that we want to invoke is get connection ID, and because JavaScript has its own naming convention, we're gonna say small character for first method. I will they then call then. So this is gonna be a result. Again, I'll say function, and in here I will have my connection ID. Okay, I need to store it. So let's go ahead and create a variable. Connection ID equals, let's say empty. And this is kind of a global thing. So I want to put an underscore here, and I will here, and this is where I will assign my connection ID to this connection ID. Page loads, we connect. Once we have connected, we grab the connection ID. We have our connection ID. Nice. ID. Okay. So let's go ahead and put it in here. I will actually put this here, and like so. I'll say URL. Okay, so we're joining a room, and the things that we're passing are all in the URL. I'm just going to specify null for my body, since that's what's this method. I think I can't remember exactly if it's required or not. I will rather just be safe. So result, I'll just say console log res, or rather, let's say connection established, or what connection? I mean, room joined, and we're gonna put an exclamation. We're happy about it. All right, and we're gonna log the res, and then we're gonna do a catch. We're gonna grab the error, and then we're gonna say console log error failed to join room. And again, exclamation. We're unhappy about it, right? So same thing means two different things. But that's all right. And for the leave room, we will leave it for now. I don't think we'll actually need to call it. I will show you one thing that you might want to do with it, but maybe not. But anyway, so we have the join room, and all I'm going to do with this is I'm just going to call it here. So once all of this has started and done, I'm going to call join room. So actually, thinking about it, once the connection is finished here, and we have received, we know that we're going to have our connection ID. This is where we set it, and this is where we pass it. So essentially, after I'm going to set my connection ID here, I want to join the room, okay? And let me actually grab this connection here where I started, put it after this, the declaration of the function, because it's sequential. I don't want to run into any stupid errors. Okay, so I'm gonna, should we send any messages? No, let's first see if we actually managed to join the room. Okay, so one thing that I actually forgot is to register this chat hub with this URL here. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's jump into our startup. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab my routes. I'm gonna not add, but map hub. And I'm gonna get my chat hub in here, right? So I'm mapping my chat hub. And what's going to happen is I'm going to pass in a route chat hub in here. Okay, let me close this off. All right, so now essentially, because we're not using MVC with default routes, when we create our routing in this use MVC, it will look something similar to this, but there we specify a scheme. Here we specifically say which hub we want to use for which route. Okay, this is the URL, and that's the hub. This is the hub, right? So I'm going to close it, and again, same URL, and now you know which hub we're mapping to. And this is the function that is in our chat hub and what we're going to be invoking. So let's go ahead and refresh this. Okay, so one thing is Axios is not defined. I am, I'd say, unhappy about this. Why is it not defined? I thought I already imported it. Nope. I can't believe I did this whole thing without Axios. I forgot about it. So let's go ahead. So let's go ahead and bring in Axios. Okay, I'm gonna grab this link. I will leave the link in the description, or I'll try not to forget that I said this. I'm gonna just include it here because no, it's not included anywhere else. Okay. Okay, so let's give this another refresh. Okay, so room joined. There we have some information, no data because all I'm doing is returning okay. But we have joined a room, and you can see this logging here at the start. This is the chat ID that I was talking about, and again, for some reason, it's generated on the client, but it's not accessible on the client. So go figure. All right, and even I'll show you if I'll go to this connection. So this connection is this hub connection, right? ID here is one, but like everywhere else that I looked, I couldn't find it. So if you find it, what's it called? Pop me a comment. Right, this is not a terminal. What am I doing? I have to press a button. Okay. Yeah, if you find how to get the connection ID on the client, I'd like to know your input. Leave a comment. Shout it out. Ping me an email. Send the pigeon messenger. Okay, so we're joining a room. Let's go ahead and finally send a message. I want to grab this form and I'll actually, instead of submitting this, I want to prevent the default event where it submits it. I want to listen on this event, and then I want to basically get all the information. Okay, so let's try it. Let's go ahead and say we will create a function where we will be sending messages. All right, so let's create a variable send message equals function. All right, and here I'm going to pass an event. So I'm going to say event.prevent default. So when I submit my form, I'm actually going to not submit it by reloading the way the form generally submits. I don't want to do that. What I want to do is actually grab the data in the form and send it just that, right? So let's go ahead and say, I'll just do a quick thing. I'll say variable form equals null. I will then go here and I will say event dot target. Okay. So and here where I have my chat input and this form, I will attach an event to it. So on click I'll say send message and not on click, on submit. Okay, send message. Actually, let's not forget to pass my event here. Okay, nicely. Let's refresh. So now let's go ahead and type something in, and that something is going to be this. And let's grab the form here, and you can see that this is this form that's getting attached here. Now, what we can do is we can create new form data and pass in our form to it, okay? And what this will create is this form data. We can't really see much of it, but essentially that's what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be taking this form. I will delete it here, and let me actually say var data equals new form data, and I'm going to pass this in here like so. I will then go ahead, grab Axios again, and I will post again. Go away. Go away. Alright, and I'm going to pass a post to my chat controller. Now, let me actually, this post here, I will remove all of this stuff. No, so let's remove this, and now what I will need in my form is a chat ID, message, and room name, okay? So, let's see what I have. I have a chat ID, I have a message, and I will need a room name, and I'll say it like so. Now let's go ahead and post this data. So I will go chat, I'll say chat slash send message. Send message, yep, correct. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to post this data. And then I'm going to I'm going to say console log message sent. And we're going to catch the error here. Console log. It ain't working. I'm joking. Proper messages. Failed to send message. Okay, cool. So let's give this a refresh. Let's go ahead and type in something. Let's send it. We can see that the message is sent. And here, right before our message sent, we can see this object. So chat ID, Anton, blah, blah, blah. This is our receive message function here. So this is where we're logging this here. All right, so this is where I would say I want to create a new message, and I want to go ahead and add it to this chat body. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and create a message. And in here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say document, create node, sorry, not node, create element, and I'm going to create a div, right? Since our message is a div, I'm also going to take this message, I'm going to grab the class list, I'm going to add message to it. I will then need my header, paragraph, and footer. So let me go ahead, copy this. I will say header, header, paragraph, paragraph, footer, and footer. And to each one of these, I will need to append a bit of text. So I'll take header, append child, and I will say document text node. I will not pass anything. I will rather go into my data. And in here, if you look to the console, we can see that we want the text, or rather the name, right? So data.name. I will then copy this a few times. Let me grab the paragraph, put it here, footer, put it here. For my paragraph, I want the text, and for my footer, I want the timestamp. Okay. Let's give this a little bit of separation. I will stop console logging the data. What I will want to do as well is I want to grab this message and I want to append child, right? So I want to add a header, I want to add my paragraph, and I want to add my footer as well. And then I want to grab my chat body. So I'm going to say var body equals document dot get element, or rather let's say query selector. And in here I will say dot because it's a class, and I'll say chat body. And then my body, I will go ahead and say append message. Okay, so once I receive the message, I'm gonna dissect this data essentially into these header, paragraph, and footer nodes. I will add it to my message right here, and then I will grab my chat body and append the message to it. So really, I don't actually need to store it in a variable here. I can just do this. Okay, so let's try again. Let's refresh. There we see our message, and let's say hello world. And there you can see that the message is instantly passed down here. One thing is the date is all messed up. The original way that I handled the date, let me see, date time now. Okay, so I think what we'll have to do is convert this date a little bit. So let's say var date equals, if I can even spell it, new date to local to date string. Pass that here. Let's refresh. And another one. Okay, this is a that's not the date I expected. Let's try to local date string. Let's refresh that. Give it another test. I mean, kinda there. Was it to say to local string? And Jesus, this is harder than I thought. Thinking about it, I don't think I actually want to do this since different countries are gonna. This is not a production, multi-global, product. I do, however, want to make a okayish application. So what I want to say is I will just create a new product, not new product, new object, and this is going to be an anonymous object. All right, so I will just go ahead and say text equals message dot text, name equals message dot name, and I will say time stamp equals message timestamp and to string, and I will just reuse the same format. So I'm a month, year, is it hour, minute, second. Okay, so I think that should be all the same names. Date, name, text. Yep. Okay, cool. Give this a refresh. Let's send this message sent. Same format. Nice. One thing I'd say on when we send the message, let's also go ahead and clear our input. So let's create an ID here, and let's call this message input. I'm gonna go ahead into my send message. I'm gonna right here, right before I send. So once I send it, it's sent. If it fails, whatever, you lose your message. All right. So document dot get element by ID. I'm gonna pass my ID. I'm gonna grab the value. I'm gonna set it to an empty string. Okay. So let's give this a refresh. Hello, clear message. Enter. Oh, and there we go. Let's actually give this a proper test and see reactivity in action. So let's go ahead and go here. I think did I create a bob before? I did. You always make the bob. Is always make the bob. All right, so let's go. Which room am I in? It would be nice to know actually. So I'm in second room. So that may be a little thick, You might want to extend it this way. But anyway, we're in second room. I'm gonna join the second room. Let me make this a little bit smaller. I'm gonna type in, "Hey Bob," and there we can see it. And Bob's gonna be like, "Oh, hey Anton, boomshank," right? That's what I'm talking about. So let's actually leave and go into Anton's room, and let's go ahead. Where did you go, Bob? And you can see that the message is not being popped up. And that will be essentially it for our chat application messages. And we can actually go over how to go ahead and make something for private conversations now, okay? But just before that, I'm just gonna have a little bit more fun. I'm gonna get my 10th browser here. I'm gonna go ahead and register as Jade, all right? I'm gonna get password because I cannot remember passwords. Go into second room, all right? All here. Never save it. Yes. Roger. White people love saying Roger. Anyway, yeah, let me. I'll stop playing around with this. So let's go ahead and start with trying to just find the users. I'm gonna go ahead, close all those tabs. I'm gonna go to the home controller, and at the start, where I have the index page, I'm gonna create a public action result find. And what this page is going to do, it's going to provide a list of users, okay, that I'm going to return to the page. So I'm going to grab users equals ctx users. Oh, let me go full screen. I like that. I will take all the users that the ID doesn't equal to mine. So whichever user is logged in is not going to find those users. I'm just going to say to list. One too many brackets on here. So now I have a bunch of users. Let's go ahead and also create a public action result. Create private room. Okay. And in here, all I want to do is pass in a string ID, and actually let's call it user ID. So this is the user that we are going to be inviting to a private chat, okay? We'll return actually I don't know what it will return yet. Let's create a new chat. Okay, so we're gonna grab this chat. It's going to be a new chat. There isn't going to be a name, but the type is going to be chat type private. Okay, this will have to create this chat, so I'm gonna call this async task. And let's say chat.users.add new chat user. So user ID equals user ID. Okay, so there are going to be two chat users. First one is going to be the user that we're adding, and the second one is going to be the user that is requesting. So let's go ahead to the context. Let's grab the chats, and let's add this right here. Chat, and let's call await. Save changes async. We save our changes, and now we want to go ahead and after we have created it, let's pop over to the chat. Let's go ahead and not view, but rather to action, and I'll go to chat and I will pass in a new ID and a chat ID. And if you're not sure, this ID is generated after we call save changes async. So upon creation of this chat, the ID is not present, but after it's saved, the ID is created. So that's how we get access to that. Okay, so we're at the chat. That looks all right. Let's go ahead and implement this find thing. So use shared layout. First, I want to go into the layout and I want to create a couple of links just to make the navigation a little bit easier. I want to create a link to home. So this will just be a home link, and then I will go to find, and I will also have private chats. So private chats are just going to be a different page. Okay, so I'll just say private here, find here. Okay, so private doesn't exist yet. We actually, I'll remove it. I don't think we'll need it now that I think about it. A bit tired, but let's keep going. So find, let's actually create this page. So here, let's do find.cshtml. At model, we are going to be passing an enumerable of user. For each bar user in model, I'm not gonna do anything complicated here. I'm just gonna create a div with a link in here, and this link is going to point to home, not actions, but rather action, and it's going to point to create private room, and sp route ID, or rather user ID, user.id, and inside of it we're going to say user.username. Okay, seems reasonable to me. Yep. One thing is this will probably need a. Actually, let's see how it fares. I think it will be all right. Let's try to see what we got. Okay, so the links are pretty much invisible at the top there. Let's style them. Let's say navbar display flex direction a row. Nothing else that comes to mind. Navbar A. I will say color white. Text decoration none. The underline is pretty annoying. Font size 18 pixels, so I want it to be a little bit bigger. And let's say I want it to be aligned somewhat better, right? So let's go and say 0.75 rem and 1.5 rem. Let's give this a control refresh. Okay. They are a little bit too far apart. Say 1 rem. Okay. Good enough. Let's say actually, I don't like how the padding between both of them is bigger than the padding between here and here. You see, this is double the padding here. So let's just say padding left 1 rem. Okay, and maybe we'll increase it in a second, but say padding top 0.8 rem. There we go. Much better. So let's go to the find page. Here we can see Bob and Jade. Let's try to navigate to one of them. There we go, and we get a room. You can see it has no name. So let's go ahead and fix that up. Let's go to our view components, and we'll take the room view component, and right here we will say and x.chat type equals chat type private. Nope, room. We want to only get rooms. One thing I will do the using statement instead of, and drop this to a new line like so. Okay, let's give this a refresh. Okay, we no longer get private rooms here. Okay, so that's fine. So now thinking about it, I actually want to add the private page, and on there I'm going to display a list of private rooms and the people that we're chatting with. So let's close this component, this. Let's go ahead and create another page, public iAction result, private. And here I'm going to return the view. And here I want to have my chats, right? So these are going to be my private chats. So let's go ahead, say chats. Let's go into our context. Let's grab chats. Let's include our users, and we will say x chat type equals chat type dot private. So we're getting all the private ones, and not chat type, but I think rather it's just type. Yep. And we'll say as the same in the room component, we'll say users any, and we can say y dot user ID equals this ID here. Okay, so let me drop this down here. Is this one too many? Nope, it's not. That's all right. Screen's so small. Let's call to list. Okay, so we have our chats where our user is present. So let's go ahead into index page, and I will just pretty much copy what we have here. Close this. I will create a, actually I can just copy the index page and I'll just name it private. Okay. Now that I have this, what I can do is instead of chat name, I want to grab the user with which the user is chatting. All right. So where is it? Sorry, let me close all of this. I'm getting a little bit confused. So again, I'll open the private chat room. I will grab this again, and what I will do is instead of grabbing the name, because we don't set the name, it's a private chat, I'm gonna go to users, and I'll actually need to include the user name here as well. So I'll have to do then include x dot user, all right, because I would like the user's name. So once I include that, I will go to users, first or default, and here I can say var user ID equals this, and basically say x dot ID, or rather it's going to be user ID in here, equals, not equals, user ID, and then I'm going to grab user, I'm going to say username. Okay, so I have my chat users. I grab the first chat user that doesn't have the same user ID as me. I'm going to grab the other user in that chat, and I'm going to say display his name to me. Okay, I'm going to say chat with, actually I'm not going to say that. That's look, it seems a little bit cheesy. Let's go ahead into the layout. Let's copy this. Let's say private as it was intended to be in the first place, and give this a refresh. Okay, let's go to private. Okay, so claim type doesn't exist. not to worry. Claim types comes from namespace, which, whoa, did I copy it? I'm not sure. Come on. Copy this. And at the top here, all we can do is just say using Bosch. Give this a refresh. And yeah, grabbed one too many. Okay, cool. All right, so here we can see the chat with Bob. And let's go ahead and open up another window and let's double check that it all works. Okay, so Bob, password. Oh, Bob, password. Okay. So this is a room that we haven't joined. Bob is actually a private chat. So if we go to private chat, we can see that this is a joined private chat. Now, this opens up the doors for basically specifying notifications. If you're accepting, basically you include a status in the model view. If you want to accept that, if you guys want to see me build this functionality, leave a comment. I don't know if I have mentioned, I can't remember if I have mentioned this many times in the video. I don't want to keep mentioning it, but basically, if you are seeing this chat application and you're saying basically, right, it'd be cool. I want to know how to do this, but you don't want to invest the time into making it, you can go in the comment section and you can leave a comment and tell me, right, I want you to make this bit. So let's go ahead and join both of these chats. And right, so this is actually doing a bit of a join room on us. Okay, so we don't actually want this. We want home chat. So we want to go straight to the chat. And I'm assuming, I can't remember ID. Yeah, just pass in the ID, chat route ID. Okay, let's try this again. Okay, so we're in the chat. Oh, I haven't refreshed this. Can actually see some errors popping up in the console, and res is not defined. Let's grab the chat real quick. Let's see what's up. Where is it? Okay. Okay, so this is the res. So where we are catching this error, so that's all right. And the 404. Oh, okay. So you can see this room name, this at model, it's actually empty. So I will be inclined to just pass the ID here. And I think that will be the general change here. Let me see really quickly what we have in our chat controller. Where we have the room name. Let's change, oh, let's change this to, so room name, I will change this to room ID. Oh, so it will be passed as an integer. We have it as an integer on our front end, but when we pass it, it will be a string. Okay, so this room ID though, I don't need it here because it's the same as a chat ID, and really probably want to rename it to room ID as well here. So chat ID, room ID. Okay, and this room ID I'll just do to string. Okay, I'll fix it like that. Okay, looks alright to me. Let me close this. I will have to rename this to room ID and I will scrap the name. We'll have to do regression testing to make sure that we haven't broken the rooms, but this generally seems alright. Let's go ahead and give this a refresh. Get my incognito window in here as well. Okay, so room joined. Let's go hi Bob. Okay, and there it is. Hi Anton. Okay, cool. Let's do some testing in terms of this. So hi stuff. All right, message is sent. There it is. And Bob's replying back. So at this point, this is pretty much a fully functional chat application. I will be making another episode on cleaning up the code, so stay tuned for that. I think that will be a little bit more interesting than that, since I will dive into design patterns. But thanks for watching. If you have any questions, Leave them in the comments if you want to see me build any additional functionality or you're not sure how to. Again, you can ask questions, you can ask for suggestions, or you can just flat out just ask me to build it, and I will go ahead and do it. Now, if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe. Hopefully, I'll see you around. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.